maybe, just maybe, we are reading into this a little bit too much. But I think there's reason to dive into a topic like this, since it gives us the opportunity to fill in the blanks and maybe overthink a little bit. That's always fun to do. Maybe not in real life, but when thinking about our favorite sports teams, yeah, that's really fun to do. Overthinking and thinking about what possibilities there could be. Because today what I wanted to do was talk about some of the teams that have been scouting the Montreal Canadiens as of late. And these come to us in the form of Stu Cowan, who went out there and posted some of the scouts in the Bell Center for the recent Montreal Canadiens games. I wanted to focus on the previous two, because the Canadiens' showdown against the Nashville Predators from a few nights ago, and the Canadiens' loss at the hands of the New York Rangers yesterday, each featured some very intriguing names on the Scouts in the Press Box list. Take a look at what Stu Cowan posted on the 16th. Scouts in the Bell Center for tonight's game between the Canadiens and the Predators. You had Derek McKinnon of the Boston Bruins, Justin Falk of the Buffalo Sabres, Andre Savard of the Devils, and Ryan Fitzgerald was there too. That's former American Hockey Leaguer and son of Tom Fitzgerald, Ryan Fitzgerald. Ryan Bonus of the New York Islanders, Garth Joy of the New York Rangers, Ryan Hardy of the Toronto Maple Leafs, plus you had Alan Heppel of the Utah Mammoth and Patrick LeBlanc of the Vancouver Canucks. Now, normally, these sorts of things aren't really that worth looking into for a lot of us fans. We see, all right, well, there are scouts in the building. What else is new? Scouts are always in the building, right? NHL teams have pro and amateur scouting departments. The amateur scouting focuses on the prospects and the guys that they could draft. The pro scouting focuses on the guys that the team could trade for that are already pros. So it's not really that big of a deal, right? Well, Stu Cowan then also tweeted out the press box for the Montreal Canadiens in their game against New York 2 days later. You had Stephen McIver from the Anaheim Ducks, Jim Clark of the Colorado Avalanche, Chris Yzerman of the Detroit Red Wings, who, hey, interesting fact, he happens to be the brother of Steve Yzerman. He was a scout with Stevie Y in Tampa Bay, and then he headed over to Detroit to become a pro scout there. David McLean of the Minnesota Wild, Alan Heppel of the Utah Mammoth, and once again, Patrick LeBlanc of the Vancouver Canucks. Now, I'll repeat myself again, just because NHL teams are scouting the Montreal Canadiens, sometimes even twice in a row, that doesn't necessarily mean that a trade or anything of that nature is on the horizon. It's just letting us know that Vancouver and Utah are indeed scouting the Montreal Canadiens to a considerable capacity. 2 games in a row, they're doing their job, of course. If these scouts were not watching the Canadiens, they'd probably be out and about watching some other pro hockey league game. But Montreal is interesting, because a lot of the replies on Stu Cowan's tweet just go out there and speculate as to what could be the case. Denver Habs man says, hey, tell all these scouts they can have Patrick Laine free of charge. New Jersey's going out there with 2 scouts. All of these scouts are their next opponents. Which also does make sense. The Vancouver Canucks, they have the Montreal Canadiens next week. Literally 7 days from now, they'll be playing off against Montreal at Rogers Arena. So, of course, you want to see them getting their scouting on. They need to know what it is they're going up against. The Utah Mammoth, on the other hand, they don't play the Montreal Canadiens until November 8th. So, that's 2 weeks from now. Who knows whether or not Utah is looking at Montreal with the idea of maybe trading for one of their guys, or if they're just doing some really early evaluation for their scouting. Also, I do kind of wonder, if it is just the case that Montreal is being scouted by Vancouver and Utah twice in a row because both of these teams want to get the inside scoop as to how the Habs play, I wonder if you're actually able to get a comprehensive look as to how a team plays and formulate a strategy from how they play from the testimony of one guy watching their games twice in a row. Heck, it could even be more than that, who really knows? But I'm just going off of the past 2 games here. Nevertheless, the more interesting conversation to have is whether or not the Canucks or the Mammoth are looking at Montreal because they want to make a trade. I don't know about Utah, but Vancouver, they've been looking for a center this entire time. Not saying that Alex Newhook or Kirby Dach are the answer for Patrick Allvin and his squad here in Van, but it wouldn't surprise me if they did have scouts around the NHL just surveying the market and looking at centers that may or may not be available. Dach and Newhook are not necessarily the best options, but they are there. If Vancouver is able to look at them and say, hey, they play a certain style of game that we think would fit with our team, then maybe there is a deal to be made. Who really knows? Or if the Montreal Canadiens fans in the comments are correct and both of these teams are looking for Patrik Laine, for example, then maybe that's an entire other conversation that I don't know if it really needs to happen. Yeah, I don't know. We spoke about Patrik Laine a bunch over the past few years. I don't really know how he'd do in Vancouver. I don't think he'd be useful with the Canucks, to be honest. There are already a lot of wingers, and his work ethic, especially his mobility, that doesn't really spell any optimism for Vancouver fans who are already so tough on their hockey team based off of how things have gone the past few years. Meanwhile, the Utah Mammoth, you head over to their lines and you look at who is on there. I think they could probably use themselves a third-line center. I mean, they've got Barrett Hayton and Logan Cooley down the middle, but then their third-line guy is Jack McBain, who I don't necessarily think is the best guy to play as center, but he's a physical guy. He loves to hit. There's a lot of pace that he brings, and his physicality, of course, is a plus. Nick Schmaltz can also play center, too, so I guess there's a bona fide extra guy there. But out of all these guys, I mean, McBain, Liam O'Brien, Carconi, there's a lot of physicality and size there, especially with Lawson Krause. So I don't necessarily know what the Mammoth would be looking at either, unless they were interested in a guy like Patrik Laine to get some scoring in the bottom of their lineup there. I know we harp on Laine a lot, but I'd rather have him in the lineup than Liam O'Brien, even if it's on a fourth-line role. With this in mind, though, if you're a Vancouver Canucks fan or a Utah Mammoth fan, I want you to let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. Do you think these teams are just scouting Montreal for the lulz because they want to go out there and say, all right, well, we watched Montreal twice in a row. This is what we gathered for games that are happening weeks out? Or could there be a little bit of extra insider discussions happening? Could they be targeting some Montreal Canadiens players? Or do they just happen to coincidentally be targeting Nashville and New York guys? Who really knows? This, of course, means nothing in the grand scheme of things. It's either we see a trade or we don't, and these lists of scouts at games doesn't really change anything in regards to what's being talked about. They're all just doing their jobs, but I did find it interesting that we saw Vancouver and Utah's name pop up there twice in a row for Canadiens hockey games. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below about all this stuff here. If you enjoyed this video, feel free to hit the like button. If you didn't, the dislike button's down there for you as well. Let me know in the comment section all your opinions, because comments help out with the algorithm. I'd really appreciate that. I hope you enjoyed this video. Sign on, and bye.